Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. These are Flytanium Crossfade scales for the Benchmade knives Bugout. First off, I want to thank Flytanium for sending these guys along. What actually happened is they posted a picture of these new Crossfade ones and I on Instagram, and I think I said, like, damn, those are pretty. And they slid right into my DM, said, hey, you want to check a pair out? And I said, absolutely. But as always, I sent them the disclaimer from my website. I told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send him along. And in fact, they didn't just send along one set, but they sent along a second set that they've done a little bit of custom lasering and anodization on, which was not requested, but is welcome. And they did a pretty damn good job of it, too. But nonetheless, so I ended up with two pairs of these guys. We have to assume that these are the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, although I owned the Bugout previously, so we, it fit. But nonetheless, and I'm doing my best not to let that or the nice engraving affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, I have already reviewed the Benchmade Bugout. I mean, size comparison. Hey, look, it's about the size of a Bugout, right? I've already reviewed the Bugout, so I'm not going to go deep into, the details on the Bugout again. Instead, I'm going to focus on what basically happens to the knife when you put these scales on. Are they an improvement? Are they a disprovement? That's not a thing. Demeanment? I don't know. I don't speak the English, right? So, nonetheless, we're going to focus on that right there. And focus on what basically this knife turns into when you put the Flytaniation on there. So next thing, who the heck is Flytanium? Well, they are a Utah-based company, right? They're based just down in there, but they're working with overseas suppliers to have these guys made. And so that's what we got here. So let's go on ahead and talk about what I'm liking about these guys, what I'm not liking so much, and I'll give you some final conclusions. So on the good side, and I'll focus on this guy because that's these installed, but the pricing on these guys is actually pretty solid, right? These are $69 for the scales alone. That is a nice price, right? I actually figured we'd be coming in a lot higher. As I was carrying these, I made a point not to learn the price tag until I was getting ready to sit down and write my review, and I had these priced out in my mind about $100. And so the fact that they came in at $69, nice. That's great. And so it makes this an option for a lot more people than it otherwise would have been. Next thing, this should work with any of the Bugout variants that have the same screw and liner patterns, right? All that it really requires is that you're reusing the standoffs in the back, you're putting the liners in. If you watch my disassembly, you'll see exactly what you do to install these guys. And I think that right now that's all of the Bugout variants as of July 2021, but who knows what's in the pipe, and maybe they made some obscure version that uses a different screw pattern. Look, I don't know, but right now I believe this works with all of the versions of the Benchmade Bugout, so chances are, if you've got a Bugout, even one of the custom ones, it should work just fine with these scales, so that gives people a lot more options. Next thing, this does preserve a lot of what I love and what a lot of people love about the Bugout. In fact, it improves some of the things I dislove. Wow. Guys, get a reviewer who speaks the English. That would be helpful here. But although it definitely does add weight to the knife, the Bugout is absurdly light as it is, it's still under an ounce an inch, containing the titanium scales, which they have very helpfully pocketed out pretty substantially here. So we're at 2.84 ounces for a 3-inch blade here. Yeah, a little bit over 3 inches. That's a pretty solid lightweight sort of knife still. The knife remains very, very thin. It doesn't become, a behemoth. And it is still an absolute joy to carry because it is thin, it is relatively light, and there's nothing at all on the back of it. It's just a very easy knife to carry. I really appreciate the fact that this doesn't make the Bugout into something fundamentally different. Sure, if you make these out of, copper, and by the way, they do have these in a variety of metal. These are the titanium, but they do have copper and bronze and whatnot. That'll make them a little bit heavier, but the titanium ones actually leave this feeling still relatively bug-outy, even if not so hyper-minimalist, lightweight sort of thing. Next thing, I really like the Crossfade design. If I just show you on the stainless, or on the plain titanium here, it just looks great, right? Because it gives you something a little bit more visually intriguing. It gives you something very attractive here. So, you have this whole area here, and then you've got all of these little intermediate, like, interpolation lines. You've also got this area up at the front here, which seems a little incongruous, but then you can use this to make pinch cuts, right, where you're pinching the knife like this. It just feels great in that way as well. These are really nice, and then ergonomically speaking, you've got areas of contouring under your fingers here. I just really like this pattern here. A lot of the aftermarket scales for the Bugout end up feeling like just slabs of titanium. Like, hey, we replaced the plastic with a chunk of titanium. It's like, that's great, but This is really artful, right? Even the lanyard hole looks good on this, and that ain't much, that ain't easy, right? So I really appreciate the fact that they put in that time to make this fancy in design, because it really does dress the knife up. It turns the knife into something very fundamentally different. And actually, that's the last good thing here, is that it really makes the knife feel fundamentally different. The Benchmade Bugout is a knife that is iconic. It's probably one of their very best sellers by a wild margin, because it is lightweight, because it is a very straightforward, functional little tool. I like a lot of the elements of the Bugout, but I never really cared for the plastic scales, right? It always felt a little bit too lightweight, a little bit too cheapy for me. Putting these scales on it makes this a knife I like a lot more, because it not only feels a lot classier, right? When you put on a very nice looking set of scales, the knife just looks better, right? And you can do anodization, you can customize, you can do all those crazy things, just like they showed us here. But it makes the knife feel a little bit more substantial. It becomes a much higher end knife. And although, the balance moves around a little bit, fundamentally, this still has the character of the Bugout. And so I will say that I never really loved the Bugout. Like, I owned one because it is, a very important knife in the pocket knife world at the moment. But now I love the Bugout. Putting these scales on it changed it. It made it a little bit nicer, a little bit stiffer, but it retained the essential. This is now a really, really nice knife. And so to me, this feels like a much more, unique and different affair. This feels like a high-end pocket knife, whereas the original Bugout felt like a super minimalist pocket knife where there were some compromises made. On the bad side, it is worth noting, though, that, the $69 price is literally just this. You get scales. You don't end up getting the knife with it. And so as a result, you have to add in the cost of a Bugout to one of these guys. If you don't have one already, a Bugout's going for $131 right now. Then the scales for $69. It adds up to $200 exactly. I don't think that's a coincidence. But nonetheless, $200 for a nicely scaled titanium knife in S30V is okay. But it's a little bit of a bigger ask if you don't have a Bugout already. It's a little bit different. I had one, so this was very easy. But if I had to buy the Bugout too, you know what? I still think it's not a bad choice for $200. Like, this package for $200, I'd probably recommend even as it stands, but it is still a little bit more of an ask, right? So remember that the $69 price tag is not including the other bits, right? Next thing, as with any kind of a modding product or an aftermarket scale, you are at the mercy of the base knife, right? If the base knife isn't made right, then this isn't going to help it. Actually, in my case, when I installed these, the centering did get better on the knife. But if your base knife doesn't run right, then I'd send it home, get that fixed up. You want to make sure that you have a nice free-swinging axis lock with no play, good centering, that kind of thing. That is definitely, that's an improvement. And you also still have the questions about the long-term durability of the Omega springs. A lot of folks have had those issues with Bugouts before, and it is still S30V, which at $200 is getting a little less impressive these days, but nonetheless, you are at the mercy of the base knife, but that's not the end of any worlds particularly either. You just need to make sure that you get a good Bugout to put these guys on. And finally, it is worth noting that it does do away with that ultralight quality of the Bugout, right? A number of people were posting memes like, Benchmade, we want our knife to be as light as possible, the knife community. Absolutely not. That's kind of a thing, right? It does change the fundamental character, but in my estimation, it actually improves it. It remains very light, but it remains also very nice. So to me, that's the bad here, is it's no longer ultralight. You are at the mercy of the quality control and materials and whatnot of the base knife, and it does start to add up if you don't have a Bugout to start. But honestly, I really like these scales. This is a really great way to make what was old new again, and it really does transform the piece. And given that the price is solid, while preserving a lot of the good of the Bugout, it has an interesting design, and it creates something that is classy and excellent from a knife that, has always felt a little bit, little toy-like maybe is a way to put it. I think that's great. I mean, it does add up value-wise. You are at the mercy of the base knife, and you are no longer in ultralight territory, but you know what? I like these scales a lot. They really do fundamentally change the knife and make it into something that is fundamentally different. I have never really, I've owned the Bugout for a while, but it was sort of owned in that classical sense of in that reviewer sense of I have this around so I can pull it out for comparisons and things like that, or to try out scales. I own a spaced out Bugout, which is a very different thing, and I do carry that, but this guy made me love the Bugout. When you swap the scales out, it turns out it's a very, very different knife, and that knife with these scales on is a gem. It is very, very, very nicely done. They've done a good enough job with things like internal milling, with things like quality tolerance, etc., to make the Bugout feel substantially better and make it feel substantially different. But more importantly, I think one of the great things that any of these kinds of aftermarket scale options have, I've always said, if you have to model a knife to love it, you don't love the knife. And that's generally speaking true, right? But this is one of those cases where I think there are going to be a lot of people out there who have a Bugout and who like the knife substantially, but maybe they don't love the feeling of the plastic, right? Or maybe they love the ultra lightweightness of it, but they've gotten a little bored with the piece. This is a way for, a relatively inexpensive price to take the Bugout that you have and make it new again for a little while, to transform it into something a little bit different that, maybe does appeal to you a little bit more, maybe is a little bit more interesting, or maybe, I don't know. So I feel like, they're the kind of the two markets. There are the people who've never owned a Bugout before and, see this and they're like, yes, and you know what, for $200, I think this is a pretty good knife. If you get a really good Bugout, you get scales that you like, this is going to work great. It's going to be, it's going to be a really solid piece for you, and I think it will be a gem. But if you already have a Bugout and you've gotten a little bit bored with it, or maybe you decide, like a little bit more then you know what? These are going to be great. It's going to make you fall in love with the knife again, if not twice as much so, and I think it's going to be a joy. So I think Flytanium did a really nice job here. And I love seeing these kinds of nice, intricate machinings. And this has given me an appreciation for a model of knife that previously never quite, floated my boat. So really well done, Titanium. Titanium, wow. Really well done, Titanium. You've done a very good job of letting Flytanium shape you into this piece. But very well done, Flytanium. These are really nice products. Absolutely a shining freaking gem. And I hope that if you got a bug, I hope these don't bug you. Because it's a bug. Actually, I think it'd be a bug in if you're putting Flytanium onto. Anyways, I digress. Hope this has been interesting to you, and that you find this knife pretty fly, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.